The thunder of hooves echoed across the dusty prairie as Cora Winters clutched her 6 children close, watching their last hope disappear with the stagecoach that had refused to hire her. With nothing but a small carpetbag of belongings and 6 hungry mouths to feed, Cora fought back tears as the merciless Montana sun beat down on them in the summer of 1878. "Mama, I'm thirsty," whimpered 4-year-old Lucy, the second youngest, her blonde curls matted with sweat against her forehead. "I know, darling. We'll find water soon," Cora promised, though uncertainty gnawed at her like a hungry wolf. 3 weeks a widow, 6 children to care for, and not a soul in the town of Silverwater willing to give her work. The boarding house wouldn't take them. The general store owner had laughed in her face, and the saloon. Well, they'd offered her work, but not the kind a decent woman would accept. "Mrs. Winters?" A deep voice called from behind her. Cora turned, instinctively pushing her children behind her. A tall man approached on horseback, dust swirling around the hooves of his chestnut stallion. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see a strong jawline covered in stubble and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "I'm Elijah Reed," he said, tipping his hat. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with the stagecoach manager." He dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life on horseback. "I own a cattle ranch about 10 miles north of here. I've been looking for a housekeeper, someone to cook meals and help keep the place in order." Cora's heart leapt, but experience had taught her caution. "That's kind, Mr. Reed, but I have 6 children. No one wants to hire a woman with 6 young ones underfoot." Elijah's gaze moved over her brood 12-year-old James, 10-year-old Hannah, 8-year-old twins Samuel and Sarah, 4-year-old Lucy, and 2-year-old Daniel, who clung to her skirts. His expression softened. "I've got room for all of you," he said simply. "My house is too big for just one man, and I reckon those youngsters could be useful once they learn the ways of ranch life." Cora studied him, trying to discern his character. At 34, she'd learned to be wary of men offering too much too quickly. But there was something in his steady gaze that spoke of honesty. And what choice did she have? "Mr. Reed, that's very generous, but I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition, madam. Truth is, the place could use a woman's touch. I can offer you fair wages, your own quarters for you and your children, and honest work." He paused. "I know it's sudden, but sometimes life doesn't give us much time to ponder decisions." James, her eldest, stepped forward with the man-of-the-house demeanor he'd adopted since his father's passing. "We're hard workers, sir. Mama taught us all to pitch in." Elijah nodded approvingly. "I believe you, son." He turned back to Cora. "What do you say, Mrs. Winters? Will you come work at the Double R?" Cora looked at her children's hopeful faces and felt the weight of their future pressing down on her shoulders. "We accept your offer, Mr. Reed, and I promise you won't regret it." As they prepared to leave town, Cora couldn't know that this desperate decision would change not just her circumstances, but her heart as well. The journey to the Double R ranch was arduous for the weary family. Elijah had arranged for a wagon to transport Cora and her children, while he rode alongside on his horse. The 2 youngest fell asleep quickly, lulled by the rhythmic motion, while the older children gazed wide-eyed at the vast Montana landscape. "Have you always lived out here, Mr. Reed?" Hannah asked, her curious nature getting the better of her shyness. "Most of my life," Elijah replied. "My father brought us west when I was about your age. Staked our claim, built the ranch from nothing." Pride colored his voice. "Been running it alone since he passed 5 years back." "Our pa died too," Samuel volunteered. "In the mine collapse." Cora winced. The memories were still too fresh. Thomas's broken body being carried from the Silver Creek mine, the pitying looks from the other miners' wives, the swift realization that her husband had left them with almost nothing. I'm sorry for your loss, Elijah said, his voice gentle. Mining's dangerous work. Thomas was a good man, Cora said softly, but not much of a planner. When he was gone, we couldn't keep our home. Elijah nodded, understanding. Life out here doesn't leave much room for error, but a fresh start can be a blessing in disguise. As they crested a hill, the double-R came into view, a sprawling ranch with a large main house, a barn, stables, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the pastures, and a creek wound through the property like a silver ribbon. It's beautiful, Cora breathed. Welcome to your new home, Elijah said, a hint of pride in his voice. The main house was larger than Cora had expected, a two-story structure built of sturdy timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Inside, it was functional but clearly lacking a woman's attention to detail. Dust lay thick on surfaces, dishes were stacked haphazardly, and the furniture arrangement suggested practicality over comfort. I apologize for the state of things, Elijah said, seeming to see his home through her eyes for the first time. Been a while since anyone did more than the basics. No need to apologize. This is why you hired me, Cora replied, already mentally organizing the tasks ahead. Elijah showed them to their quarters, a large room with an adjoining smaller one on the first floor, accessible from both inside the house and a separate entrance from the porch. Thought you might appreciate some privacy, he explained. The boys can take the smaller room, you and the girls the larger one. There's a water pump out back for washing, and the privy's just beyond that. This is more than generous, Mr. Reed. Elijah, please. He shifted awkwardly. I should let you get settled. Supper's usually at 6, but don't worry about cooking tonight. Mrs. Holloway from town sends meals over with the supply wagon once a week. We've got stew warming. After he left, Cora sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. James watched her, his young face serious. Do you think we'll be safe here, Ma? Cora looked at her eldest, so much like his father in appearance, yet with a caution Thomas had never possessed. I believe so, James. Mr. Reed seems an honorable man. He has kind eyes, Hannah remarked, unpacking their meager belongings. Yes, he does, Cora agreed, surprised by her daughter's observation. Now let's get cleaned up for supper. First impressions matter. That evening, they gathered around the large oak table in the dining room. The ranch hands ate in the bunkhouse, so it was just the family and Elijah. The children were subdued at first, their table manners impeccable despite their fatigue. This stew is delicious, Cora commented, breaking the silence. Mrs. Holloway's a fine cook, Elijah agreed. Though I expect you'll be wanting to take over the kitchen soon enough. I'd be happy to start tomorrow. No rush. Take a day to settle in. Elijah turned his attention to the children. So, who's going to tell me your names again? I'm afraid I've already gotten them mixed up. One by one, the children introduced themselves. James spoke of his interest in books and numbers, Hannah of her love for sewing. The twins Samuel and Sarah giggled through their shared passion for exploration. Lucy shyly admitted her fondness for animals, and little Daniel simply grinned, showing his few baby teeth. Well, I think you'll all find something to love about ranch life, Elijah said warmly. We've got a small library that James might enjoy, plenty of mending for Hannah, acres to explore for the twins, animals galore for Lucy, and, he winked at Daniel, the best mud puddles a boy could ask for after a rain. For the first time that day, Cora's children laughed freely, and something tight in her chest loosened just a fraction. Later, after the children were settled in bed, Cora stepped onto the porch for a moment of solitude. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the vast Montana sky. Beautiful night. Elijah's voice came from the shadows. He stepped into view, a cup of coffee in his hand. It is, she agreed. I'd forgotten how bright the stars are away from town. One of the best things about ranch life. He hesitated. Mrs. Winters, Cora, please. Cora. Her name sounded different in his deep voice. I want you to know your children are welcome here. I meant what I said about having room for all of you. Why? The question escaped before she could think better of it. Why take on a woman and 6 children? Most men would run the other direction. Elijah was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkness. I know what it's like to be without options. My mother raised 3 boys alone after my father took ill. Folks weren't always kind. He sipped his coffee. Besides, this place needs life in it again. Been too quiet for too long. Cora studied his profile, illuminated by the silver moonlight. There was a loneliness there she recognized, having carried it herself these past weeks. Well, you certainly won't lack for noise with my brood around, she said lightly. His laugh was warm and genuine. I'm counting on it. As she bid him good night and returned to her children, Cora felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks' hope. The following days established a rhythm to their new life. Cora rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Elijah and the ranch hand's 5 weathered men who treated her with respectful courtesy. The children quickly adapted to ranch life, finding their places in this new world. James took to following Elijah when his chores were done, absorbing knowledge about cattle, horses, and the business of ranching with an eagerness that pleased both his mother and their employer. Hannah discovered the joy of keeping house on a grand scale, taking pride in transforming the neglected rooms into comfortable spaces. The twins became explorers of every corner of the property, always under the watchful eye of Cookie, the grizzled old ranch cook who had taken a shine to the children. Lucy found paradise in the small collection of barnyard animals, while Daniel toddled after everyone, collecting treasures and experiences with equal enthusiasm. For Cora, the work was hard but satisfying. She discovered that running a ranch house wasn't so different from managing their modest home in town, just on a larger scale. What surprised her was how quickly they all began to feel at home. One evening, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Cora was hanging laundry on the line when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Elijah rode in, looking tired but content after a long day checking the north pasture. "Evening, Cora," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. "Something smells wonderful." "Beef stew and apple pie," she replied, pinning one of Hannah's dresses to the line. "Dinner will be ready in about an hour." He nodded appreciatively, then hesitated. "I've been meaning to ask, are the children settling in all right? Getting what they need?" The concern in his voice touched her. "They're thriving, Elijah. I haven't seen them this happy since before Thomas died." Relief softened his features. "Good. I was worried the isolation might be hard on them after town life. On the contrary, they seem to bloom with all this space." She smiled. "James talks of nothing but the cattle. I think he's found a calling. He's a bright boy, quick to learn." Elijah removed his hat, running a hand through his son's streaked brown hair. "All your children are special, Cora. You've done a fine job raising them." The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. "Thank you. That means a great deal." Their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Cora felt a fluttering sensation she hadn't experienced in years. She quickly looked away, focusing on the laundry. "I'd better see to Blaze," Elijah said, referring to his horse, "and clean up before dinner." As he led his mount toward the stables, Cora found herself watching him go, admiring the easy strength in his movements. She caught herself and shook her head slightly. She was here as his housekeeper, nothing more. Entertaining any other thoughts would be foolish. Yet that evening at dinner, she couldn't help noticing how Elijah had trimmed his beard and changed into a clean shirt, or how his eyes crinkled when he laughed at the twins' stories, or how gently he helped Daniel cut his meat without being asked. Cookie tells me you've been helping him with the bread. Hannah? Elijah said, turning his attention to her 10-year-old. Hannah nodded shyly. He's teaching me how to make sourdough. It's like magic watching it rise. She's got a natural touch, Cora added proudly. Always has, even with our old temperamental stove in town. Talent runs in the family. Then, Elijah said, his gaze meeting Cora's. This stew is the best I've had in years. The simple compliment brought color to her cheeks. You're too kind. Just honest. He turned to James. I thought tomorrow you might ride with me to check the western fence line. It's time you learned more about the boundaries of the Double R. James's face lit up. Really? I can come with you? If your mother approves, Elijah said, looking to Cora for permission. Of course, she replied, touched by his consideration. Just mind your manners and do as Mr. Reed says. Yes, madam. James could barely contain his excitement. After dinner, the children helped clear the table before Cora sent them to wash up for bed. When they were gone, she found herself alone with Elijah, an increasingly common occurrence in the evenings. You don't have to do that, he said as she began washing the dishes. It's my job, she reminded him. Still, he picked up a dish towel. My mother always said washing up goes faster with two. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the splash of water and the clink of dishes. May I ask you something personal? Elijah said finally. Cora tensed slightly. You may ask. I can't promise to answer. Fair enough. He dried a plate with careful attention. How did you come to have 6 children so close in age? If that's not too forward. The question surprised her, but it wasn't inappropriate. Thomas and I married young. I was 16, he was 20. James came along 9 months later. She smiled at the memory. Hannah followed less than 2 years after. The twins were something of a surprise, and Lucy came along when I thought we were done. Daniel was. She paused. Daniel was unexpected but very much wanted. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. You must have loved your husband very much. I did, Cora said honestly. Thomas was charming and full of dreams, not always practical ones, but he made life an adventure. She rinsed a cup. What about you? Have you never married? A shadow crossed his face. Almost once. Catherine was her name. We were engaged when I was 25. What happened? Cora asked softly. Influenza took her the winter before our wedding. His voice was steady, but she could hear the old pain beneath the words. After that, I threw myself into the ranch. Never seemed to find the time to court again. I'm sorry, Cora said, meaning it. Loss leaves a hollow place that's hard to fill. Yes. His eyes met hers. Recognition passing between them, the understanding that comes only from shared experience. Though sometimes new beginnings can help ease old hurts. The air between them seemed to change, charged with something Cora wasn't ready to name. She broke the connection, focusing on the last of the dishes. I should check on the children, she said, drying her hands. Of course. Elijah stepped back, giving her space. Thank you for dinner, Cora. And for the company. As she walked to their quarters, Cora tried to ignore the warmth that had bloomed in her chest at his words. She was a widow with 6 children, hired to keep his house in order. Nothing more could or should come of their friendship. Yet as she tucked her children into bed that night, she found herself wondering what it might be like to build a new life here. Not just as employees, but as something more. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Life at the Double R settled into a pleasant routine as summer gave way to early autumn. The days grew shorter, the mornings crisper, and the aspens along the creek turned golden. For Cora and her children, the ranch had become home in a way their small house in town never had. One crisp September morning, Cora was kneading bread dough when Elijah appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression serious. "I need to ride into Silverwater today," he announced. "Supply wagon's late, and we're low on some essentials. Would you like me to prepare a list?" Cora offered, wiping flour from her hands. "Actually, I was hoping you and the children might come along." His suggestion caught her by surprise. Thought they might enjoy a day in town. And, he added with a slight smile, "Hannah mentioned she needs fabric for new winter clothes." Cora hesitated. They hadn't been back to Silverwater since leaving nearly 3 months ago. The prospect of facing the people who had turned her away made her stomach tighten. Elijah seemed to read her thoughts. "The Mercantile got a new shipment of books too. James might find something interesting." "You're bribing me with books for my son?" she asked, a reluctant smile forming. "Is it working?" His eyes twinkled. "Perhaps." She sighed. "Very well. When would you like to leave?" "After breakfast. I've asked Cookie to prepare a picnic lunch we can eat on the return journey." 2 hours later, they were on their way to town, Elijah driving the wagon with Cora beside him. The children arranged in the back amidst empty supply crates. The twins chattered excitedly, pointing out landmarks and wildlife, while James read from a book Elijah had lent him about cattle breeding. Hannah held Lucy on her lap, the two of them singing a song about prairie flowers, and Daniel napped against a folded blanket. "They seem happy," Elijah observed, his voice low enough that only Cora could hear. "They are," she agreed. "You've been very good to them. To all of us. It's been my pleasure." He adjusted the reins. "Truth is, I never realized how empty the ranch was until you filled it with life." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. "We needed a fresh start. You gave us that." Their eyes met briefly, and Cora felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. These moments had been happening more frequently, lingering glances, hands brushing while passing dishes, conversations that continued long after the children were in bed. She knew she wasn't imagining the growing connection between them, but she was uncertain what to do about it. As they approached Silverwater, Cora's anxiety returned. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and her desperate situation after Thomas's death had been common knowledge. "Mama, look," Sarah called from the back. "There's the school. Can we go see it?" Samuel added eagerly. The question caught Cora off guard. They hadn't discussed schooling since arriving at the ranch. With the nearest school 5 miles from the R, she'd been teaching the children at home as best she could. "Perhaps another time," she replied, not wanting to make promises she couldn't keep. Elijah glanced at her. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Mrs. Peterson, the schoolteacher, mentioned they're looking for more students. The railroad brought some new families, and they're hoping to expand the school." "That's interesting," Cora said carefully. "But the distance. I thought maybe James could ride in with one of the hands 3 days a week. The twins and Hannah too, when weather permits." He kept his eyes on the road. "Just something to consider." The idea that he had been thinking about her children's education touched her deeply. Before she could respond, they arrived at the main street of Silverwater. The small town was busy for a weekday, with horses tied outside the saloon and several wagons parked near the general store. As Elijah helped Cora down from the wagon, she felt eyes turning their way. Whispers followed as they walked toward the Mercantile, the children trailing behind them. "That's the Winters woman," she heard someone murmur. "Got herself situated out at the Reed place. 6 children and already setting her cap for the rancher," another voice replied. "Some women have no shame." Cora's cheeks burned, but Elijah's hand settled at the small of her back, steady and reassuring. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "Small minds make the most noise." Inside the Mercantile, Mr. Parsons greeted them with surprise. He was the same man who had refused to hire Cora months earlier, claiming her children would be disruptive. "Mr. Reed, a pleasure to see you, sir." His gaze shifted to Cora, recognition dawning. "And Mrs. Winters, I heard you'd found employment." "Mrs. Winters is an invaluable addition to the Double R," Elijah said, his tone pleasant but firm. "We'll need the usual supplies, plus whatever is on her list." While Elijah discussed ranch needs with the shopkeeper, Cora took the children to look at fabric and books. Hannah's eyes widened at the selection of calicos and wools, while James immediately found the small shelf of books at the back. "Mrs. Winters?" A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. Cora turned to find Emily Thornton, the minister's wife, smiling warmly at her. "I was so pleased to hear you and your children found a place. We've missed seeing you at Sunday services. The distance makes regular attendance difficult," Cora explained, touched by the genuine welcome. "But we've been well, thank you." "I can see that." Emily's gaze moved to the children, who were behaving impeccably. "They look happy and healthy. And you," she added with a knowing smile, "look different too. Country air agrees with you." Before Cora could respond, Lucy tugged at her skirt. "Mama, can I have a peppermint stick? Mr. Reed said to ask you." Cora looked up to find Elijah watching them, a slight smile on his face. He nodded, silently telling her it was all right. "Yes, you may. One for each of you," she told Lucy, who ran back to relay the good news to her siblings. Emily watched the exchange with interest. "Mr. Reed seems very fond of your children." "He's been exceedingly kind," Cora acknowledged, feeling her cheeks warm under the other woman's perceptive gaze. "And of you, it appears." Emily patted her arm. "Don't let the gossips trouble you, Cora. A woman alone with 6 children needs a good man, and Elijah Reed is one of the best this territory has to offer." After completing their purchases, they visited the post office and had a quick lunch at the small cafe, a rare treat for the children. Throughout the day, Elijah stayed close to Cora's side, his presence both protective and respectful. By the time they headed back to the ranch, the sun was beginning its westward descent, painting the landscape in rich autumn gold. They stopped at a creek about halfway home for their picnic, spreading blankets under a stand of cottonwoods. The children, excited by their day in town, played an impromptu game of tag while Cora and Elijah laid out the food Cookie had packed. "Thank you for today," Cora said as they watched the children. Despite the gossip, it was good for them to visit town. "People will always talk," Elijah replied. "It's what they do when they have empty lives. Still, I don't want to damage your reputation." He turned to face her fully. "Cora, I don't give a damn about gossip. What I care about is you and those children being happy and safe." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "We are happier than I thought possible after Thomas died." Elijah's hand found hers on the blanket, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I want you to know something. When I offered you a job that day, I was just trying to help a woman and her children in need. I never expected." He paused, seeming to search for words. "What?" Cora asked softly. "I never expected to find a family." His gaze held hers. "Because that's what you've become to me, Cora. All of you." Before she could respond, Daniel came toddling over, a wildflower clutched in his chubby hand. He presented it to Elijah with a beaming smile. "For me?" Elijah asked, accepting the slightly crushed bloom. "Thank you, Daniel. It's a fine gift." The toddler clambered onto his lap with the easy confidence of a child who knew he was welcome. As Elijah settled Daniel against his chest, Cora felt something shift inside her, the last barrier of caution giving way to a truth she could no longer deny. She was falling in love with this good, generous man who had room in his heart for a widow and her 6 children. The realization both terrified and exhilarated her. That night, After the children were asleep, Cora found herself unable to rest. She slipped outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool autumn air. The porch steps creaked slightly as she sat down, gazing up at the star-strewn sky. "Can't sleep." Elijah's voice came from the darkness. He emerged from the direction of the barn, a lantern in hand. "Just thinking," she admitted as he joined her on the steps, setting the lantern beside them. Its golden light cast long shadows across the yard. "About today?" "Partly." She pulled her shawl tighter. "Elijah, what you said at the creek. I meant it." His voice was steady. "Every word." "I know." She took a deep breath. "And it frightens me." "Why?" he asked gently. "Because I'm starting to want things I shouldn't." She kept her eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "Things beyond our arrangement." Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then his hand found hers in the darkness. "What if I want those things too?" Cora turned to him, her heart pounding. "You can't mean that. I'm a widow with 6 children. I bring nothing but responsibility and hard work." "You bring life, Cora." His voice roughened with emotion. "Joy and laughter and purpose. Do you know how empty this place was before you came? How empty I was?" "Elijah, let me finish." His fingers tightened around hers. "I spent 15 years building this ranch, thinking it was enough. But it wasn't. Not until you and those children filled it with family." Tears pricked at Cora's eyes. "We're not your family." "You could be." The words hung in the night air between them. "If you wanted." Cora felt dizzy with the implications of what he was saying. "The children love it here, love the ranch." He paused. "Maybe, in time, they could come to love me too. I already care for them as if they were my own." "And me?" she whispered. In answer, Elijah reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "Cora Winters, I'm falling in love with you. I think I started the day I saw you standing in the dust of Silverwater, holding your family together through sheer will." His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just for you to consider the possibility of us building something together." Before she could respond, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a gentle, questioning kiss that held both passion and restraint. Cora found herself responding, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. "Think about it," he whispered. "That's all I ask." With that, he rose and walked back toward the barn, leaving Cora with her thoughts and the lingering warmth of his kiss. The weeks that followed were filled with a sweet tension as autumn deepened across the Montana territory. Cora and Elijah continued their daily routines, but there was a new awareness between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of feelings that grew stronger with each passing day. For Cora, the decision wasn't simple. She had loved Thomas, impulsive, charming Thomas who had swept her off her feet as a girl, but what she felt for Elijah was different. Deeper, steadier, built on respect and shared purpose rather than youthful passion. And there were the children to consider. How would they feel about Elijah becoming more than their employer? She found her answer one rainy afternoon in late October. The children were confined to the house by the weather, and Elijah had suggested they all gather in the main parlor, where he kept a collection of games and books. As thunder rumbled outside, the family engaged in an animated game of charades, with even little Daniel participating by mimicking the older children's actions. Cora sat slightly apart, mending one of Samuel's shirts, but her attention was on the scene before her. Elijah was in the center of the room, attempting to act out what appeared to be a horse bucking, while the children dissolved into helpless giggles at his exaggerated movements. "A bronco," James finally called out, and Elijah pointed at him triumphantly. "Finally." I thought I'd have to draw a picture next, he laughed, dropping into a chair beside Lucy, who immediately crawled into his lap. My turn, Hannah announced, stepping into the center. As the game continued, Cora was struck by how naturally Elijah had integrated himself into their family circle. There was no awkwardness, no sense that he was an outsider. The children went to him as easily as they came to her, seeking his attention, his approval, his affection. And he gave it freely, with a patience and tenderness that Thomas, for all his good qualities, had never quite mastered. When the game ended, Elijah suggested a story before dinner. The children arranged themselves around him as he opened a well-worn copy of Treasure Island. Lucy and Daniel on either side, the twins cross-legged on the floor, Hannah leaning against the arm of his chair, and James trying to look too grown-up for stories, but unable to resist the pull of adventure. As Elijah's deep voice filled the room with tales of pirates and buried gold, he glanced up and caught Cora watching him. The look they exchanged was filled with meaning, and in that moment, Cora knew her answer. Later that night, after the children were asleep, she found him on the porch, smoking his evening pipe as rain pattered on the roof. May I join you? She asked softly. He quickly stood, knocking the pipe against the railing to extinguish it. Of course. Would you like my jacket? It's getting colder. I'm fine. She moved to stand beside him, looking out at the rain-shrouded landscape. For a moment, they were silent, listening to the rhythm of the falling water. I've been thinking about what you said, Cora began, her heart pounding. About us, about building something together. Elijah turned to face her, his expression careful, hopeful. And, I think, she took a steadying breath. I think the children already see you as family. The way they were with you today, it's how they should be with a father. Hope brightened his eyes. And you, Cora? How do you see me? As the man I've fallen in love with, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. I didn't expect it, didn't think I could feel this way again. But here we are. Elijah's smile was radiant in the dim porch light. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Are you certain? I don't want you to feel any obligation because of our arrangement. This has nothing to do with obligation, Cora interrupted gently. And everything to do with the man you are. Kind, honest, hard-working. The way you love this land. The way you've opened your home to us. The way you care for my children as if they were your own. They are my own, in my heart, he said, his voice rough with emotion. From the moment you all stepped foot on the Double R. He drew her into his arms then, and this time when they kissed, there was no hesitation, no holding back. Cora let herself be swept away by the tenderness and passion of his embrace, knowing that this was right, that this was where she belonged. When they finally parted, Elijah kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. Marry me, Cora, he whispered. Let me be a father to your children, a husband to you. Let's make the Double R our family's legacy. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, Elijah Reed, I will marry you. His whoop of joy echoed across the porch, startling her into laughter. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as rain dripped from the eaves around them. When? He asked eagerly as he set her down. Tomorrow? Next week. Cora laughed again, delighted by his enthusiasm. Let's at least tell the children first, and perhaps wait until the preacher makes his monthly circuit. 2 weeks, then, Elijah decided. Reverend Thornton will be through in 2 weeks. Is that soon enough? It's perfect, she agreed, her heart full to bursting. Though we should probably discuss it with the children before making final plans. Of course. He sobered slightly. Do you think they'll approve? Why don't we find out? Cora suggested. Tomorrow at breakfast. The next morning, Cora woke with a blend of nervousness and excitement. She and Elijah had agreed to tell the children together over breakfast, before he headed out to work with the ranch hands. When everyone was seated around the table, the usual morning chatter filling the kitchen, Elijah cleared his throat. The children fell quiet, looking at him expectantly. "I have something important to ask all of you," he began, his voice steady despite the tension Cora could see in his shoulders. "As you know, your mother and I have become good friends since you came to the R. James narrowed his eyes slightly, his protective instincts visibly rising. Hannah, always perceptive, glanced between the adults with dawning understanding. "The truth is," Elijah continued, "I've grown to care very deeply for your mother, and for all of you." He looked at each child in turn. "I've asked your mother to marry me, to make our arrangement permanent. But before she gives her final answer, we both wanted to know how you feel about it." There was a moment of profound silence. "Then, does this mean we get to stay at the ranch forever?" Samuel asked, hope brightening his face. "Yes," Elijah nodded. "This would be your home permanently. And I would be—" He hesitated. "Well, I'd be your stepfather. Would we call you Pa?" Sarah asked bluntly. Elijah's expression softened. "You could call me whatever feels right to you. Elijah is fine, or Mr. Reed, or anything else that you're comfortable with." "I like it here," Lucy announced, her 4-year-old logic simple and direct. "And you tell good stories." Daniel, too young to fully understand, simply smiled and reached for another biscuit. Hannah was next. "I think it's wonderful," she said, her eyes shining. "You make Mama happy. We can all see it." All eyes turned to James, the eldest, whose opinion carried the most weight among the siblings. He studied Elijah thoughtfully. "Do you love her?" he asked finally. "Really love her? Not just want someone to cook and clean?" "James," Cora admonished, shocked by his directness. But Elijah held up a hand. "It's a fair question." He met the boy's gaze steadily. "Yes, James, I love your mother. More than I thought possible. And I love all of you too, though in a different way. I'm not trying to replace your father, I know that's not possible. But I would be honored to help raise you, to teach you what I know, to provide for you, and to protect this family with everything I have." James held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I think it's a good idea." The tension broke, and the younger children erupted in excited chatter. Lucy clapped her hands. The twins began discussing what this meant for their explorations of the property, and Hannah immediately started planning what she would wear to the wedding. Cora met Elijah's eyes across the table, sharing a moment of pure joy amidst the cheerful chaos. The family they had both longed for was becoming real before their eyes. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the scattered community. Most reactions were positive. The ranch hands offered hearty congratulations. Cookie baked a special cake to celebrate, and Reverend Thornton sent a note expressing his pleasure at performing the ceremony on his next visit. Not all responses were favorable, however. When Elijah rode into town for supplies the following week, he returned with a tight expression that told Cora something had happened. "What is it?" she asked that evening, after the children were in bed. Elijah sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Nothing worth repeating." "Elijah," she pressed gently, "tell me. Some folks in town have opinions about our engagement." His jaw tightened, "Suggesting you're after my property or that I'm—" He hesitated, "taking advantage of your situation." Cora felt her cheeks burn with indignation. "That's ridiculous. We're both adults making a choice." "That's what I told them, in not quite such polite terms." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I may have suggested that Mr. Parsons focus on his own marriage before concerning himself with ours." Despite her anger, Cora couldn't help but laugh. I imagine that went over well. About as well as you'd expect. Elijah reached for her hand. I don't care what they think, Cora. But I won't have them speaking ill of you or the children. People will talk, she said, echoing his earlier wisdom. But in time they'll see the truth. The truth being that I'm the luckiest man in Montana territory? He pulled her gently into his arms. The truth being that we're building something real, she corrected, resting her head against his chest. Something that has nothing to do with convenience or practicality. As the day of the wedding approached, the double are bustled with preparations. Hannah and Sarah gathered wildflowers to decorate the house, while James and Samuel helped Elijah clear an area in the main pasture where the ceremony would be held. Cookie outdid himself planning a feast, and the ranch hands constructed tables and benches for the guests' neighboring ranchers, the few townspeople they considered friends, and even some of Thomas's former mining colleagues who had remained kind to Cora after his death. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with just enough bite in the air to remind them that winter was approaching. Cora stood in her room, Hannah carefully arranging her hair, while Lucy watched in fascination. You look like a queen, Mama, Lucy breathed, her eyes wide at the transformation. Cora smiled at her reflection. She wore a new dress of deep blue wool, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs, a gift from Emily Thornton, who had insisted a bride needed something special. Her hair was swept up, with a few tendrils framing her face, and pinned with the pearl combs that had been her mother's. Do you think Elijah will like it? She asked, suddenly nervous. Hannah smiled knowingly. He won't be able to take his eyes off you. A knock at the door revealed James, handsome in his best shirt. His hair slicked down with water in a valiant but not entirely successful attempt at neatness. Reverend Thornton is here, he announced, and Elijah's pacing like a caged mountain lion. Cora laughed, her nervousness giving way to excitement. Then I suppose we shouldn't keep him waiting. James offered his arm with a solemnity that made her heart ache with pride. I'll walk you out, Ma, if that's all right. I would be honored, she said softly, taking his arm. Outside, the ranch was transformed. Lanterns hung from posts around the clearing, wildflowers adorned every available surface, and a simple arch of twisted branches marked the spot where they would exchange vows. Guests stood in small groups, turning as Cora emerged from the house with James beside her and her other children following in a neat line. But Cora saw only Elijah, waiting beneath the arch. He wore a new black suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved. The moment their eyes met, everything else faded away. The guests, the ranch, even her children momentarily receded from her awareness. There was only this man who had opened his home and his heart to her family, who had seen value in them when no one else would. The ceremony itself was simple and profound. Reverend Thornton spoke of new beginnings, of two lives joining to create something stronger than either alone. Elijah's vows, spoken in his deep, steady voice, included not just Cora but her children as well. I promise to love and honor you, Cora, for all the days of my life, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. And I promise to be a father to your children, to guide them, protect them, and love them as my own. The double R will be our legacy to them, built by all of us together. When it was Cora's turn, she found the words rising from her heart with surprising ease. Elijah Reed, you offered room for all of us when we had nowhere else to go. You saw worth in us when others didn't. I promise to be a faithful wife, a partner in all things, and to help make this ranch a true home filled with love and laughter for many years to come. By the authority vested in me, Reverend Thornton concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Reed, you may kiss your bride. Elijah's kiss was tender and reverent, mindful of their audience yet conveying a depth of feeling that made Cora's heart soar. When they turned to face their guests, It was as a family united Elijah with his arm around Cora. The children gathered close around them. The celebration that followed was filled with music, dancing, and more food than even Cookie had anticipated. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Cora found herself watching her children throughout the evening. James deep in conversation with a neighboring rancher about cattle breeding techniques. Hannah teaching younger children a circle dance. The twins regaling guests with elaborate tales of their adventures on the ranch. Lucy solemnly offering flowers to every lady present, and Daniel falling asleep in Elijah's arms as the night wore on. "Happy?" Elijah asked, appearing at her side with a cup of punch. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted, accepting the drink. "Look at them, Elijah. They belong here. We all do." He slipped an arm around her waist. "This is just the beginning, Cora Reed." The sound of her new name sent a thrill through her. "Mrs. Elijah Reed." She tested the words. "I like how that sounds." "So do I." His eyes darkened with promise. "Though I confess I'm looking forward to the end of the celebration, when I can have my wife to myself." Cora felt heat rise to her cheeks. They had discussed sleeping arrangements beforehand, agreeing that Elijah would move his things into her larger quarters, while the children would remain in their adjoining room. It was a practical solution that offered the newlyweds some privacy while keeping the family close. "The children will be with Emily and Robert Thornton tonight," she reminded him. "They offered to take them back to town until tomorrow afternoon to give us." She hesitated, suddenly shy despite her years of marriage to Thomas. "A wedding night," Elijah finished, his voice low. "A chance to begin our marriage properly." Later, as the last guests departed and the Thorntons herded the excited children into their wagon for the adventure of staying in town, Cora found herself alone with her new husband in the main house. The sudden quiet was both intimidating and exhilarating. "Would you like a cup of tea?" she offered, falling back on the habits of hospitality. Elijah's smile was tender as he took her hands in his. "Cora, you're not my housekeeper anymore. You're my wife." He lifted her fingers to his lips. "You never have to serve me again." "I don't mind," she protested. "I like taking care of you, and I like taking care of you." He drew her closer. "Which is why I had Cookie prepare a bath for you before he left. It's waiting in our room." "Our room." The words sent a flutter through her stomach. "That was thoughtful. Go enjoy it," he encouraged. "I'll lock up and be along shortly." The bath was perfect hot water scented with lavender, steam rising in the cozy room that now belonged to both of them. Cora sank into it gratefully, letting the water soothe away the tension of the day. By the time Elijah knocked softly on the door, she was wrapped in a cotton nightgown and robe, her damp hair loose around her shoulders. "May I come in?" he asked, his deep voice slightly muffled by the door. "It's your room too," she called back, oddly nervous despite having been married before. Elijah entered, still in his wedding clothes but with his jacket removed and his collar open. He stopped when he saw her, his expression softening. "You are so beautiful, Cora Reed." She flushed with pleasure at the compliment. "As are you, husband." He crossed to her slowly, as if giving her time to adjust to this new intimacy between them. When he reached her, his hands came up to frame her face. "I've imagined this moment for so long," he confessed, "having you here as my wife. But the reality is far better than any dream." "Even with 6 children sleeping a room away?" she teased gently. "Especially with 6 children who are now ours together." His thumbs stroked her cheeks. "Though I'm grateful for the Thorntons' hospitality tonight." Their first kiss as husband and wife in the privacy of their bedroom was different from the chaste one they had shared at the ceremony, deeper, unhurried, full of promise. Cora felt herself melting into him, her earlier nervousness giving way to a familiar desire. That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time. learning what pleased and what delighted, building a physical connection that matched the emotional one they had formed over the past months. Afterwards, lying in his arms as moonlight streamed through the window, Cora felt a contentment she had never known before. "What are you thinking?" Elijah asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never expected to find this again," she admitted. "After Thomas died, I thought my life would be just about survival, about keeping the children fed and safe. And now," she propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, taking in the strong features that had become so dear to her. "Now I think about building something lasting, about leaving a legacy for our children, about growing old with you on this land we both love." His smile was slow and warm. "I like the sound of that, Mrs. Reed." He pulled her close again. All of it. The following afternoon, when the children returned from town full of stories about their adventure, they found their mother and Elijah waiting on the porch, a picture of contentment that told its own story. If the older ones noticed the new ease between the adults, the way their hands touched more frequently or their gazes lingered, they gave no sign beyond knowing smiles. That evening, as they gathered for their first meal as an official family, Elijah stood at the head of the table, looking around at the faces turned expectantly toward him. "I've been thinking," he began, "that we should make this official in every way." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a document. "This is from my lawyer in Helena. It's adoption papers for all 6 children, if you'll have me as your father legally as well as in name." James was the first to respond, his young face solemn. "You want to adopt us? Legally?" "Yes," Elijah said simply. "I want you to inherit this ranch someday, all of you together. I want you to have my name if you wish it. But most of all, I want to be your father in every way that matters." The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Would we be Samuel and Sarah Reed?" Sarah asked. "If you choose to be," Elijah confirmed. "It's entirely up to each of you." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I'd be proud to be Hannah Reed." Lucy nodded enthusiastically. "Me too. Lucy Reed sounds pretty." Daniel, understanding little beyond the emotional current in the room, simply raised his arms to be picked up. Elijah obliged, settling the toddler on his hip with practiced ease. All eyes turned to James, whose decision would influence the others. The boy was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful beyond his 12 years. "My father was Thomas Winters," he said finally, "and I won't forget him." "I would never ask you to," Elijah assured him. "Your father will always be part of who you are." James nodded slowly. "But I think he would want us to be a family again. A whole family." He straightened his shoulders. "I would be honored to be James Reed, sir." Cora felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched Elijah extend his hand to her eldest son. James took it firmly, the handshake a solemn pact between them. "Then it's settled," Elijah said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are the Reed family, all of us together." As winter settled over the Montana territory, blanketing the double R in snow, the newly formed Reed family found their rhythm together. The children thrived under the combined care of Cora and Elijah, each finding their place in the family business. James continued to learn ranching from Elijah, showing a natural aptitude that made his stepfather proudly predict he would run the operation someday. Hannah discovered a talent for bookkeeping, helping Cora manage the household accounts. The twins became expert riders, fearlessly exploring the ranch boundaries and helping move cattle when needed. Lucy appointed herself caretaker of the barnyard animals, while Daniel toddled after everyone, absorbing the ranch life like a sponge. For Cora, the transformation from desperate widow to beloved wife and partner happened so naturally she sometimes had to remind herself of how far they had come. The woman who had stood in the dust of Silverwater with 6 hungry children and nowhere to go was now mistress of a prosperous ranch, respected in the community, and cherished by a man who valued her not just for her domestic skills but for her intelligence, strength, and heart. One snowy evening in February, as they sat by the fire after the children were in bed, Elijah took her hand. "I have news," he said, his expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. "The railroad's coming through. They want to put a depot just 3 miles south of our land." Cora sat up straighter. "What does that mean for the Double R?" "It means opportunity," he explained. "Easier shipping for our cattle, better access to markets. But it also means change. More people settling nearby, more development." "Are you worried?" she asked, reading the concern beneath his excitement. "A little," he admitted. "I've always valued our space, our self-sufficiency. But I'm also thinking of the children's future. With a town nearby, they'll have better access to schooling, maybe even college for James and Hannah someday. And the ranch will adapt as it always has." He squeezed her hand. "But I wanted to discuss it with you. This isn't just my decision anymore. We're partners, Cora. In everything." The simple statement filled her with warmth. Thomas, for all his good qualities, had never consulted her on business matters, considering them the domain of men. Elijah's approach, treating her as an equal, valuing her opinion, was yet another reminder of how fortunate she was in this second chance at love. "I think," she said thoughtfully, "that we should embrace the opportunity while protecting what matters most to us. The land, the family, our way of life." Elijah's smile was approving. "My thoughts exactly. With careful planning, the railroad could be a boon rather than a threat." As they discussed possibilities late into the night, Cora realized that their partnership extended far beyond the domestic sphere. They were truly building something together, a business, a legacy, a future for their children. Spring came early that year, bringing with it new life across the ranch. Calves wobbled beside their mothers in the pastures, wildflowers carpeted the hillsides, and the creek ran full and fast with snowmelt. With the change of seasons came another transformation as well. Cora discovered she was expecting a child. She told Elijah one evening as they walked the property, inspecting the new growth and planning for summer. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for: joy, wonder, and tender concern. "Are you feeling well?" he asked, his hand protectively covering hers where it rested on her still flat stomach. "Is there anything you need?" "I'm perfectly fine," she assured him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Elijah, and I've done it 6 times before." "But not with me," he pointed out, his expression serious. "This time, you'll have a husband who insists on taking proper care of you." Cora laughed. "Are you suggesting Thomas didn't?" "I'm suggesting," Elijah said carefully, "that I intend to make sure you rest when needed, eat well, and don't overtax yourself. The ranch can manage if you need to step back from some duties." "I appreciate the concern," she said, touched by his protectiveness. "But I'm perfectly capable of continuing my normal activities for now. When the time comes that I need to slow down, I promise to tell you." They shared the news with the children that evening at dinner. The reactions were varied but universally positive. James and Hannah, old enough to understand what the new baby meant for the family, offered mature congratulations. The twins immediately began debating whether it would be a boy or girl and what games they could teach their new sibling. Lucy wondered if the baby would like her collection of special rocks, while Daniel, now 3, wanted to know if the baby would be able to ride horses with him. "Not for a few years," Elijah laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "But someday, I'm sure." As Cora's pregnancy progressed through the summer and into early fall, the Double R continued to thrive. The railroad construction brought new faces to the area, and true to their discussions, Elijah negotiated agreements that protected their interests while taking advantage of the new opportunities. A small settlement began to form around the planned depot site, and talk of a proper school had the older children excited about expanded educational prospects. On a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Cora went into labor. The children were sent to stay with Cookie in the bunkhouse, while Emily Thornton, who had become a dear friend, arrived to assist with the birth alongside the midwife from the new settlement. Elijah paced outside their bedroom door for hours, his concern evident in every line of his body. When the first cry of the newborn finally pierced the air, he froze, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and overwhelming love. "Mr. Reed," Emily called through the door. "You can come in now." He entered to find Cora propped up on pillows, tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up at him with a smile that took his breath away. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Elijah approached the bed with reverent steps, his eyes fixed on the tiny face peeking from the blankets. The baby had a dusting of dark hair and, when she blinked up at him, eyes that promised to be the same deep blue as his own. "She's perfect," he whispered, sitting carefully beside them on the bed. "Just like her mother." "Would you like to hold her?" Cora asked. With hands that trembled slightly, Elijah took his daughter, cradling her with a tenderness that made Cora's heart swell. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your pa. What shall we name her?" Cora asked, watching the love bloom on her husband's face. Elijah considered the tiny life in his arms. "Hope," he said finally. "Hope Elizabeth Reed. Because she represents everything we've built together, our hope for the future." "It's perfect," Cora agreed. Later that day, when Cora had rested, the other children were allowed in to meet their new sister. They filed in quietly, awestruck by the tiny baby in their mother's arms. "She's so small," Lucy whispered, peering closely at the newborn. "You were that small once," Hannah told her, gently touching the baby's hand. "Is she really our sister?" Samuel asked. "Even though we're adopted?" "Absolutely," Elijah confirmed, his arm around the boy's shoulders. "Family isn't just about blood, Samuel. It's about love and belonging. Hope is your sister just as much as you and Sarah are twins, or James is Lucy's brother." James, who had been hanging back slightly, moved closer to the bed. "Can I hold her, Ma?" "Of course," Cora said, carefully transferring the baby to her eldest son's arms. The boy cradled his new sister with surprising confidence. Looking down at her, then up at Elijah and Cora, he said what they were all feeling. "We're a real family now. All 8 of us." 9, Elijah corrected gently. "Don't forget your father, James. He'll always be part of who you are, part of this family's story." The boy's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "Thank you," he whispered, "for remembering him, for making room for all of us." "There's always room for family," Elijah said, gathering as many of the children as he could reach into a group embrace around Cora and the baby. "Always." As twilight fell over the Double R, casting long shadows across the land they all loved, Cora looked around at the faces of her family, the 6 children who had journeyed with her through hardship, the husband who had opened his heart and home to them all, and the newborn who represented their shared future. From the depths of despair, she had found a joy more complete than she had ever imagined possible. "No one would hire the woman with 6 kids, she murmured to Elijah as the children cooed over baby Hope. He smiled, understanding the reference. "Their loss," he said simply. "My gain." And as night settled over the ranch, bringing with it the promise of tomorrow, the Reed family, bound not just by blood but by choice, by love, and by the land that had brought them together, held tight to the truth that had saved them all. Sometimes, when life seems darkest, all it takes is one person saying, I've got room for all of you to change everything.